Pleased and very delighted to be welcoming you all to our annual general meeting. It's a pleasure to see so many familiar faces as well as some new ones. This evening we're going to reflect on our achievements over the past year and some of the significant service developments for our community. We will also outline for the future aligned with the NHS 10-year plan. We're going to open our AGM with an annual review from Tom Lafferty, our Chief Executive, followed by Tom Lafferty and Michael Meredith, Chief Strategy Officer. They're going to be taking us through the Strategic Change Programme. Tom Burton, our Chief Financial and Infrastructure Officer, will then present our financial review. We're going to hear from two clinicians. Janice Bernardo, our frailty lead, is going to showcase some of the amazing work that we've done on frailty. And Monica Bose, Divisional Director for Clinical Services and Consultant Gastroenterologist, is going to talk about our fantastic CDC Community Diagnostics Centre. Then we're going to have a session open for questions. Sorry, just one place. Before I hand over to Tom, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our people who worked so hard, dedication and commitment across the year. And also to our partners and stakeholders for your commitment to integrated care in the communities we serve. I'd like to welcome Tom Lafferty, Chief Executive, to reflect on the year.
Thank you so much, Darshana. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Lafferty, CEO at PAH, and it's an honour and privilege to be leading my first AGM as the Chief Executive of Princess Alexandra Hospital. I was actually involved in the last AGM last year, and the AGM last year was a bit different to this. It was held during daytime hours, and it was on Microsoft Teams. And I made a commitment that actually I didn't think that was particularly good from a community engagement perspective, and so I'm delighted that we're doing it out of hours, making it easier for people to come, but also getting out into the community and meeting our public and meeting the patients that we're here to serve. For me, that's what we need to be doing as an NHS trust that's accountable to the public. I think if there was one theme that runs across the totality of what we're going to cover tonight, that theme would be change. There is massive change across the NHS at the minute. There's massive change across PAH, partly as a result of the national change, but partly internally driven. And so I wanted to start by talking about some of the changes that we've had on the Trust Board over the past year, to give a few thanks to certain individuals. First of all, the chair that appointed me actually wasn't Darshana. The chair that appointed me was Hattie Llewellyn-Davis, who was the chair of Princess Alexandra for about 3 or 4 years. She appointed me in the summer of last year, and I want to put on record my thanks to Hattie for her mentorship, her wisdom, her sage advice and her experience that certainly steered me through the first few months, my first role as an NHS Chief Executive. Thank you, Hattie. The other executive change that we've had with the departure was that of George Wood. George chaired our audit committee for 6 years at Princess Alexandra Hospital. He was robust in his challenge, he was direct, but actually he always asked the pertinent questions. So thank you so much, George. Of course, for me to come into a role, there had to be a vacancy. I had to take over from somebody. And last year, Lance McCarthy, in the summer of last year, took up a role as Chief Executive of Friendly Health over in Surrey. A massive well done to Lance. He gave 7 years to our organisation, and actually he left a fairly impressive legacy for me to pick up. So thank you, Lance. There have been other executive changes that have occurred since I've arrived. So firstly, Phil Holland. Phil was our Chief Information Officer, and it was Phil who really steered the launch of what we call Alex Health, our new electronic patient record that we're going to hear a bit more about as part of the presentation in just a moment. There's also Dr. Faye Gilder. Dr. Faye Gilder was our medical director until fairly recently, until the end of August this year. Faye retired at that point. And again, the organisation owes Faye a huge debt for her contributions in areas like quality and safety, clinical governance, medical education, and research. Thank you, Faye. This month we've had a departure too. So Stephanie Lawson was our Chief Operating Officer. Steph is moving on up to Manchester to be Chief Executive of one of the units of Manchester University Hospital's Teaching Trust. It's massive kudos to Steph for all her achievements at PAH, so that's to her getting such a huge promotion, such a big opportunity. I've never known anybody with a work ethic like Stephanie Lawson, so thank you, Steph. And there's one final thank you that I absolutely need to say, and a person, unlike some of the others that I mentioned, is actually in this room. And that's Sharon McNally, sitting over there in the second row. So let me explain Sharon's background. So Sharon has been chief nurse at our organisation for a number of years now. The organisation and colleagues within it and the patients that we've treated in that time have benefited from Sharon's relentless pursuit of quality, the enhancement of safety standards, the professional leadership she provided to the nursing, allied health professionals and the midwifery workforce, positive contributions to areas like clinical governance. Sharon is a fantastic, experienced chief nurse. Next week, Sharon will be starting a secondment to become the chief nurse of Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust. So a huge, huge role, a huge, huge challenge. But I know you're up for it, Sharon. Throughout Sharon's time at the Trust at director level, she's also been Deputy Chief Executive, and that's really important because she provided amazing backup to Lance when he was here, and also Sharon's been my Deputy Chief Executive through this time as well. And once again, Sharon's been a fantastic sounding board. She supported me during moments of doubt, and she's carried so much experience and wisdom into all the deliberations that we have in our executive team and in the Trust Board. And most notably, prior to my starting, but after Lance departed, Sharon was acting CEO of the organisation for about 3 months, and she held a steady ship there. So huge thank you to Sharon. If we can have a round of applause, please. Thank you. Right, if we can move on slide, I'll work out how to do this. There we go. Fantastic. So I said that change was the theme of this AGM. And earlier this year, the government published its 10-year plan for the NHS. And the opening paragraph of the 10-year plan says that the NHS is at a critical point, and it has two choices. It can either reform or die. So it sounds very dramatic, but these are the words the government is using in its 10-year plan. And I think there's so much of that challenge that applies to us locally at PAH. We know that we're not getting it right with regard to the delivery of some of the national standards. For example, patients waiting too long in the emergency department, patients waiting too long to access the elective procedure, patients waiting too long to be seen for cancer treatment once being referred for the GP. We know we need to do better. So if anybody needs to change, we certainly do. I want you to know that we recognise that. But how are we going to change is the question? Well, in the 10-year plan, there are 3 clear shifts that are outlined, and we're trying to capitalise and get on the bandwagon for all of them. So the first of them is acute to community. So there's a national view now that actually patients shouldn't have to rely upon district general hospitals to access the majority of their care. In fact, the majority of their care should be provided closer to where they live, ideally actually in the patient's home, or if not, in a local GP surgery, maybe in a local minor injuries unit, but we need alternatives to district general hospitals for care. We also need to make sure that rather than just providing one-size-fits-all service for our population, we think about the particular population health needs that we're serving. So let me give you an example. So in Harlow, we know that we have what's called a super aging population. So all populations up and down the country are aging, all getting older. But actually in Harlow is particularly prevalent. We also have a very young population where there is a gap is in working age adults. And that means something different for us than it does for, say, a population in Chelsea and Westminster in London. It means something different for where I live, with my family in Cornwall. So all of us are being tasked with not just providing one-size-fits-all service, but to tailor our services with regards to meeting local need. And I've got some examples of that a bit later on. And I think there are 2 shifts that we need to make on acute to community. So first of them, the location change. Okay, so at the minute, people come to the hospital to access blood tests. We call it phlebotomy, but blood tests is what I'm talking about. And actually, people experience quite a lot of inconvenience in doing that. Car parking can be challenging at our hospital. We know that when you get to the hospital, it's very, very busy. It can be a bit chaotic at times. And actually, the area we've got blood testing service at the minute isn't as good as it could be. Wouldn't it be better if when coming here to do your weekly shopping, going to the Harvey Centre, you can access blood tests there? So health on the high street, that's just one example. Health on the high street is absolutely one of the things which we want to progress over the next 12 months, part of our move from the acute to the community, which means that what remains at the acute, so the district general hospital, is services that genuinely tailor for acutely unwell people. So, for example, the emergency department, intensive care services, acute maternity services. Everything else, we need to be thinking of alternative options. The other side of acute to community is not just moving the service location, but actually changing what we do, changing the way we provide services. So let me give you some examples here. Quite often at the minute, our consultant gastroenterologists in the hospital will see patients with undifferentiated irritable bowel symptoms, for example. Quite often, those same patients could see community dietitians in their community in a GP surgery, or perhaps even at home. There's work which our consultant cardiologists do, which actually the heart failure nurses in the community could do. So once again, it's about getting out there, rethinking the current models that we have. For me, that is essential for us to be clinically sustainable in the future. So that's one shift. The other shift, as part of the government's plans, is sickness to prevention. And I think in some ways this goes hand in hand with acute community, because if we're taking our services out into the community, then actually it means that it gives us an opportunity to support society, to work with local people, to connect with local people, to support them having healthier, happier lives. And hopefully, if we can, reduce the manifestation of ill health occurring in the first place. So every time we have someone come to our blood tests in the community, a chance to help support them with their overall well-being, for example. The third shift is analog to digital. Now, we made a massive step forward in this. Back in November, we launched Alex Health, which is a new electronic patient record. It was a crazy time to start for me because Alex Health became live on my very first day in post. I was slightly apprehensive about what it would be like in my first day in post, but actually, whilst we have experienced some issues with it, which are well documented in the local press, overall, it's been a real success and has given us a platform to do more when it comes to using technology. A couple of things on that. What's really important is that we don't leave our population behind when it comes to rolling out technology. We don't want to digitally exclude anybody. And so every advancement, every innovation that we bring about, we have to think about accessibility. We have to think about how are our public going to be able to use and engage this. If we do it right, I think that further technological advances will actually not only benefit our clinicians in terms of making their jobs and lives easier, but also benefit the public, giving the public more ability to take control of their own health and care. So it's exciting stuff, but we recognise that we need to take you with us on the way. Moving on, please. One of the things which is really exciting, well, I think it's just dropped. Peekaboo. One of the things that's really exciting is the Community Diagnostic Centre. So obviously at KH, we don't provide services in Harlow. We have Hearts and Essex Hospital over in Bishop Stortford. We have St Margaret's Hospital in Epping. And in St Margaret's, as of January next year, we will have a brand new Community Diagnostic Centre that will expand the breadth, capacity and capabilities of the diagnostics we can provide to our local people. I don't want to say too much about this because Dr. Monica Boyd is going to give a detailed presentation a bit later on, but it's very, very exciting. One of the most exciting things that links to what my previous slide, it isn't something that we're doing on our own. We're doing it in partnership with local primary care, we're doing it in partnership with community services, which is what acute community is all about. Us operating as one NHS and not several different versions of the NHS, which cause so much frustration for patients trying to navigate their care. I've talked about the go live of Alex Health, so I won't reiterate that. And the third thing is that earlier this year, we received confirmation with regard to funding for our new hospital in Harlow. So as you know, we're part of the new hospital programme. We know that The delays to the new hospital programme over successive governments and over many years causes great frustration to local people, also causes great frustration to our staff. What I would say is that there's probably greater certainty now than ever before that at some point Arlo will get a new hospital that directly responds to local need. What I would also say, though, is that the shape of that hospital is probably quite different now from what it was when we first developed the scheme several years ago. So if you think about what I was saying about neighbourhood health and doing more in the community, it's as much about redeveloping what we currently have in terms of our district general hospital as it is about the development of neighbourhood health hubs in places like Arts and Essex Hospital, in St Margaret's Hospital, in London Memorial Hospital, perhaps to the east of us. That's what the new agenda is about. We're absolutely wanting to be at the cutting edge of it as we progress our capital redevelopment plans. Throughout all the changes, we've had other bits of instability. So periods of industrial action have had a significant impact on our ability to provide services and therefore have an impact on our patients and the community. It's always a difficult one, this, because obviously the parameters of disputes are outside of our control and influence. But what we do try and do is support our staff to provide the best possible services during periods of industrial action. Something that I think is very much within our control is what our staff say about us. The staff surveys. Every year, our staff are asked to fill out a survey to talk about the experience of working at PAH. Around at the same time, our patients get the chance to fill out a survey. It's not on the slide. We have a national inpatient survey. It also takes place usually around September, October, November time. On both of them, we can do so much better. If you think about the NHS performance, quite often people talk about financial performance, they talk about operational performance, governance targets, government targets, and all those things are really important. But actually, if staff are telling us that PAH is not a good place to work, if patients are telling us that PAH isn't always a good place to receive care, that worries me more than anything else. And that's the bit that we need to try and correct. So whether it's from a staff perspective, whether it's from a patient viewpoint, we need to be listening and be prepared to change our services further so that we start to meet the needs and expectations of the public and also our staff. And of course, when it comes to staff, part of it is recognising when people do some fantastic stuff. So one of the things we've done recently is launched our Time 2 campaign, which directly recognises staff achievements. And on staff achievements, I've got a few individuals to call out as part of this as well. So first of all, congratulations for all our amazing people. People work so hard at Princess Alexandra Hospital. I find it awe-inspiring when I go around our clinical areas and see the amazing work that people do. It's my role, and it's our role as a board, to ensure those fantastic people are empowered to do even more. There goes another one. And not blocked by bureaucracy or nonsense, actually. We need to put the power in the hands of the clinicians to do what they know is right, based upon their practice and based upon their expertise. So, I said I'm going to talk about individual successes. So first of all, our fantastic Director of Medical Education, Dr. Preeti Gopinath. Preeti is our Director of Medical Education, and she actually won the National Director of Medical Education of the Year. Now, this has been an area of real risk and concern for PAH over the years, and the turnaround that Preeti has overseen has been truly phenomenal. I don't think Preeti's here, is she? Just checking the room. She's not, but well done, Preeti. Just an incredible achievement. On a month-to-month basis, we recognise excellence in nursing care through our monthly Daisy Awards. We've had too many winners to list here, but well done to each and every one of them. The gentleman that is here is Kelvin Langford at the back of the room, there in the corner. Kevin is our head of security and car parking. Quite rightly, Kevin was awarded the British Empire Medal earlier this year. Another person who was awarded the British Empire Medal is our fantastic chair of the patient panel, Anne Nutt, who I saw sat there. Yeah, exactly. 3 rows back. I've worked at a number of hospital trusts in my career. I've never worked at a hospital trust that has such a proactive, such an engaged, and such an influential patient panel. They're an absolute asset to us as an organisation. And everything we can do to grow membership and to make them even more connected to the life and soul of the hospital, we're up for. So thank you so much, Anne, and to all your colleagues. And of course, all the amazing people and all the amazing staff that won Amazing People and Long Service Awards at the event we held last year. So a final thank you before I hand over to Michael from me and all board members to our patients and their relatives, our local community. When it comes to community, patients, relatives, we need to hear more actually than we currently do about how we can improve. We can't meet expectations. We can't provide services to fit the needs of the community if we're not listening. So we need to listen more, we need to engage more. We've got a number of community events coming up, many of which the patient panel are supporting. And no doubt we can provide you with further information about those after this session. So this AGM won't be a one-off. We're going to have a number of community events over the next 12 months. Thank you also to all of our health and care colleagues, partners in the third sector. As I said at the beginning, the future of healthcare is not us standing alone as an acute hospital. It's us being part of a system with primary care, mental health services, community services, charitable organisations, voluntary sector. We're better together. Let's give our patients one version of the NHS. And above all, to the amazing people at PAHT, our volunteers, I mentioned the patient panel, your professionalism, commitment, care, compassion, and resilience is recognised, notwithstanding these turbulent times. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy tonight's sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and it's never great to be following your rockstar chief exec, but that's the slot that I've got, and I will be handing back to Tom. And when I say that he's a rock star, he is a rock star. He was in a rock band, but I'm sure he's going to do another number of us later, so we'll keep it up on that. And I'll set that challenge for you. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the population we serve. When I started to write this, I wrote down the challenge that we face. But it's not a challenge that we face. I think Tom set out the real challenges that we face as an NHS. That's meeting the needs of our population. We have a very diverse population and a changing population locally. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our population that we serve and how we meet their needs. And then Tom's going to talk a little bit about the changes we're making to the services that we deliver, what those services are going to look like in the future, and how we're going to work with our community partners to transform how we deliver care and hopefully better meet the needs of that population. So this first slide here shows, and this will be familiar to most of you in the room, most of you either work locally or live locally, that's why you're here. Because it's important to you, it's important to you as a population to understand how we need to meet the needs of the population. So I'm not going to talk in detail about these groups. You'll recognise these four key areas that we serve, the vast majority of which is from West Essex, but however, we do have a significant proportion of our population that's from Hertfordshire as well. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the boundary changes, some of the political changes that are happening locally. So that Hertfordshire population is quite important, but you'll understand the difference between Epping, Harlow, Buttersford, and the Soar Valley populations right across Harlow. But the population we serve isn't equal across each of those populations. I'll give you an example. For example, 92% rates, 92% of the Harlow population use RNE department, our emergency services. However, only 10% of the Uttersford North population use RNE. They go elsewhere for our services, but they do often use our other services, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So we do have a population catchment of about 450,000 people. For a relatively small hospital, that's quite a big population catchment. But we do have diverse access right across that population. Next slide, please. And our population isn't static, like our service development isn't static. It's changing all the time, and we are about to see a significant growth in our population. We're about to see about 16,000 new homes in Guildford by 2033. Now, I know my role in developing a new hospital, I get challenged all the time about how, with the delay to the new hospital, we're actually going to meet the needs of that population with our existing services. But unless we change the way we deliver those services, our existing facilities won't meet the needs of that population. And that's what Tom's going to talk a little bit about in a moment. And we are financially challenged. The whole healthcare system is financially challenged. The increase in demand that we're seeing with an ageing population, the increase in demand that we're seeing by how people are getting sicker across the whole of the nation, we are seeing a real pressure on our services, and that has a real financial pressure on our services. We represent, as a population, about 20% of our regional population, equaling the Integrated Care Board or our ICB, but we only get 18% of the budget. And yet we have the most deprived population in the whole of our catchment here in Harlow. Actually, in a CN20 population, the postcode exactly where the hospital is placed at the moment. So we are financially challenged as a system. We're seeing that demand growth and we're financially challenged. And we have further complexity in our population where our patients go for services. So some of our patients go to from the east, go to South Essex, they go down to Whipps Cross in the south, and of course they go up to Cambridge in the north. So we see a real spread of how our patients access both our service and other services. So how we work, I'm just going to talk about it again in a minute, a lot of pressure each time to get this sorted. So I'm going to talk about it in a minute, how we organise ourselves, integrate, also adds that complexity. And 60% of our patients come from West Essex, 40% of our patients come from Hertfordshire. So finally, a little bit I want to talk about the population itself. So health inequalities and equality of access. So we do know that we have a real spread of health and a real spread of deprivation across our patch. We have some of the most deprived people in the whole of Essex living in Harlow, and some of the least deprived people living in Uttlesford. So that means we've got a real diverse population. So meeting the needs of those populations is complex. It's not easy to deliver services to those different populations. So what it does mean is you have to deliver services local and understand the local needs in order to meet the needs of those populations. So we do have to think about carefully how we organise ourselves, how we align ourselves to the needs of those populations. We are also on a significant demand at the moment. Our ED, our emergency department, is designed for about 220 people a day. We will regularly see 450 people come through our front door. There is significant demand for services at the moment. We have to work out a way of managing that demand. How do we work with our GP practices to ensure that we can prevent people from turning up at our front door? They get the services they need locally, and we can only do that by working in partnership. And finally, there is political change. We know that the political boundaries are changing. We're going to become part of the greater Essex ICB, and then we have to work out how we will be organising ourselves very differently to meet the needs of that wider ICB. So there is change afoot. So Tom's going to come in now and talk about these are the challenges we face. How do we meet those challenges? How will we organise ourselves to really meet those challenges and make a difference to the population that we serve?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, that's quick. Right. So yes, navigating change. I'm talking about the population. So Dan Swords, the leader of Harlow Council, he told me something that was pretty extraordinary a few weeks back. He said the estimates show that for the next 10 years, the population of Harlow will grow to be more than the population of Cambridge, and Harlow will have true city status. That's unbelievable levels of growth. And if you think about what Michael was just saying about our emergency department and the volume of traffic that we see through there, we're already sometimes on difficult days struggling with regards to the level of demand for our services. If you take the current hospital environment and then multiply it by that level of growth over the next 10 years, that starts to become unsustainable. And that really is why changing the model is so important. The other thing the leader of Harlow Council is doing is investing quite a lot in the regeneration of Harlow Town Council. And again, as I said earlier on, why wouldn't health be part of that? Why wouldn't we want to put an urgent treatment centre in the middle of Harlow Town Centre to give people access to urgent care in a really timely way, proportionate to need? We have to change the model. One more thing to say, we haven't mentioned it, but we were delighted that the UK Health and Security Agency is relocating to Harlow. We think that's really, really exciting. We think it's a huge investment in the local economy. It gives massive opportunity for jobs. For us, it gives opportunities for develop healthcare life science partnerships, and you've already started speaking to the UK HSA with regards to those sort of opportunities, but it also makes the case, doesn't it? If there's I think, £3 billion worth of investment going into the clinical site, then surely what needs to follow is a significant capital investment in acute services that are paired alongside it. And I know Chris Vince is in the room. Hi, Chris. A few other things that Michael said then. So there are other changes that are sort of happening around us. So you probably heard that all NHS providers operate within integrated care systems. Over the last few years, Harlow and the West Essex area has been part of the Hertfordshire and West Essex integrated care system. It's been a bit of an odd place for us to be because I think most of our staff, most of our patients, not all, but consider themselves to be Essex facing. And actually most of the Hertfordshire institutions we've worked with have largely focused on Hertfordshire-based problems. And that's left us a bit in the cold, if I'm really, really honest. But that's changing. So there's been a big national shake-up in integrated care system boundaries, and we're now moving into a greater Essex integrated care system, where we'll be paired with some of our big partner organisations. So that's like Essex Partnership University Trust that provide local mental health services and adult community services to our local population, and also Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust, who we will definitely partner with when it comes to acute care as well. So there's some really exciting opportunities as we shift our focus to be more Essex focused in future. The other change that's happening with regards to the commissioning of services. So you probably know that within integrated care systems, there are things called integrated care boards. And the role of integrated care boards is effectively to pay us for the services that we provide to our population. And at the minute, integrated care boards, or ICBs as often known, do that on a year-by-year basis. Well, that's changing. So integrated care boards will still continue to exist, but they'll become what's known as strategic commissioners. So rather than commissioning year to year, they will commission over, say, a 5 or 10-year basis based upon the local health outcomes they wish to see. The year-to-year commissioning will start to fall to providers like us. Not only are we providing services, we're also responsible for the planning and commissioning on a year-to-year basis of services. A lot of technicality in that, but what it means is that we're going to have greater ability to control and influence the health and care provision that exists not only in the hospital environment, but also outside of the hospital environment. And there's a big opportunity in that for me to really, once again, join up services, join up care, and make our whole health and care infrastructure feel far more integrated. The last thing I want to say, I think on this slide, I don't want to go over all points, is the location of services. Just one more thing on this. We've been so passionate about our reorientation to become not just an acute provider, but an integrated care provider that supports local neighbourhoods, that we and our West Essex colleagues have been accepted onto the government's first wave of the National Neighbourhood Implementation Programme. So we're one of 43 systems up and down the country. There are 150-ish applications, and we're delighted that our local working across partnerships in West Essex has got us the recognition to be part of that first wave. Really, really exciting stuff. So if we can move on, just to explain some of the governance about how it works at the minute. So obviously, Princess Alexandra, we have our own trust board, and you're hearing from several board members tonight. But actually, again, above and beyond Princess Alexandra Hospital itself, we have a health and care partnership board, which I chair, and is attended by all local primary care representatives, the voluntary sector, community services, mental health services, local authority. All the local authorities have representation in it too. And that's the place where we come together to start to plan and shape how we're going to work together to make our health and care services better, more efficient, high quality, and more integrated. And again, it's the success of our Health and Care Partnership Board that has got us onto this national scheme. So some of the priorities that we're looking at across the Health and Care Partnership Board, on the next slide please, are health inequalities, frailty, access to urgent and emergency care, elective recovery, improving outcomes for children through integration, and improving use of our combined resources workforce, estate, and finance. I want to go back to what I said earlier on about how we tailor our services and our priorities based on local population. We know we have a super aging population, and that's why it makes sense for us to have a real focus locally on frailty. We're doing some fantastic work with community services and primary care with regard to what we call frailty at the front door, which is led by community practitioners and not us. We're also getting our acute practitioners to go out into the community and connect to primary care surgery. So once again, it's seamless and we're reducing some of the fragmentation that's existed historically. And also with regard to children, if I can explain this to you so you can understand the fragmentation. So we provide acute paediatric care. There's a London-based trust that provides children's mental health services. There's a private provider that provides children's community services. Local authorities provide some children's services. GPs provide some children's services, all on separate contracts, all with separate budgets, all with separate priorities. That is not the way that leads to successful health and care delivery that supports the actual patient, which in this case is our youngest people. We have to be committed to be less fragmented and more integrated. It's the right thing for our patients. Moving on, please. So in summary, and I'm going to change some of the words on here because I just read them over there and didn't think it quite sums up what I was trying to say. So I'm going to have a bit of speaker's license to change it. But it's true that we have begun to integrate further across acute and community services. Us remaining as an island at Princess Alexandra is not going to get the job done. So therefore, we have to get out into the community, better understand our public, better connect with primary care, community services, etc. We have to have a focus on neighbourhood health. We have to be prepared for our services to change and to reflect what neighbourhood need is. We have to be prepared for our services to change so that staff love working in PAH the way that I love working at PAH, and so that in the vast majority of cases, our patients receive a fantastic service, which isn't always the case at the minute. So we've got the will, we've got the determination to change, but we can't do it on our own. We need the support of partners. We need the support, advice, and feedback of the public. It's really, really important. We're a public sector organisation. We work for you. So you need to help us on this as well. Thanks so much. And now I'm going to hand over to Tom for the financial review.
Hello everyone, I am Tom B. To give you my full designation, because it gets very confusing having two Toms. So even though I was here first time, still have to be Tom B. Seeing as Tom's here. So I just want to give you a few headlines around the finances, because you heard Michael and Tom talking about our money and what it means to us. Because ultimately, in order to do everything we need to do as a trust, we need to spend money. And if you look at the headline, it's negative in the sense that we ended the year with £1.1 million. If you look, £1.1 million deficit. If you look initially, but as I'll go on to explain in the next slide, that's actually better than we said we would be by the end of the year, and reflects a great deal of effort we've done to be as lean as we possibly can to show how we can improve our overall financial position. So the numbers are a little small, and obviously you can see them in the slides later if you want to see a copy online. But the kind of key takeaway here is that we anticipated that we would start the year and have a deficit of around £5 million. If you look across the right-hand figures, you can see that we are part of a system, and the overall target was to make sure the whole system came into balance. And our condition of hitting that was to have a £5 million deficit, and we actually bettered that by the end of the year. And as I say, we're already doing that by starting to make some difficult decisions, by looking at the way we spend our money, trying to be as efficient as we possibly can. And that's a team effort. You know, I have a hand in obviously reporting the finances, but the most important thing is I don't really spend any of it. The vast majority of it is spent by our clinical divisions, and they have all set up to try and make sure we can live within our means more consistently than we have done. And the position, as you can see on the left-hand side, is from last year to this year, we improved. So there's real green shoots of recovery. However, as we'll go on to explain about what we have to do for the future, we have to keep going. We have to work with our system partners. And the only reason we are where we are is by lobbying and doing a huge amount of work from Tom and our previous chief executive, Lance, to kind of make sure we get our fair share of funding in West Essex, which we're making inroads, but there's more to do. We're just going to move to the next slide. There's some, you actually realise just how huge we are in terms of the impact on the local economy. So we have 1,000 invoices a week. You know, that's 1,000 companies potentially providing us with services who are reliant on us making sure they get paid swiftly make sure they've got cash in their pocket so that they can continue doing their business. And we are incredibly successful at paying them within a national target. They asked all of our suppliers to be paid within 30 days. And we achieved 94% of that last year. And again, my team do a huge amount of work in the background to make sure that happens, but the teams who work in the clinical areas have to make sure they follow a number of processes, use our new financial system, and make sure we've got good data, we've got good assurance, good governance. One thing we get checked on is very part of our financial position. We have to make sure we get there in the appropriate way. So we have what's called an external audit, and that is where we get an official company to come in and check our accounts, make sure we're doing everything appropriately, make sure we're doing everything sustainably. And in 24-25, as we've had for the last few years, we had a completely clean, unmodified opinion on our audit, which means we're doing everything right financially. So we're not doing it by smoke and mirrors or anything like that. We are delivering as we said we would. So it's really great. We've got a completely clean audit opinion, and we've got it in time, which is more of a challenge than you believe at our financial year end. And we make reference at the end here to a savings, efficiency and productivity program, which I'll go on to talk about the full name for that, because it's not a savings, efficiency and productivity program in what we call it. It's a patient quality and productivity program. So the only way we start to live within our means is not by trying to do haircuts or really knee-jerk reactions to spending our money. We do it by making sure we get our care right, we get it right for our patients, and give our patients the best experience. Because if we do that, it will always give us the best financial outcomes. So there's a huge team effort that goes into delivering that. And just go to the next slide. The figures we were just talking about are our revenue. So that's the money we spend day to day running the hospital, and we spend over £400 million a year running our hospital, just in terms of the day-to-day running costs. But this slide proves shows where we spend what's called our capital infrastructure. So this is one spending money on things that are going to last more than a year and part of our infrastructure. And if you look in these figures most years, you will see the vast majority of the money that we spend is on our estate, on things and to a lesser extent our equipment, because we've got an amazing hospital down the road, and it's one that I've got responsibility for the operational estate, so almost literally keeping the lights on. And it is an amazing hospital where amazing things happen every day, but it is nearing the end of its life, and that's why we're banking on getting a new hospital imminently. But in the meantime, we do have to spend a lot of money maintaining that estate. But unusually last year, as we said, we've got great success in that we've got a new Alex Health record and Alex Health patient record. We had a huge amount of money supported by the government scheme to get us up to the right level of digital funding, and we had over £18 million spent on that last year. And as you can see in the breakdowns, we spent a lot on different categories across the estate. And that's incredible. I mean, £45 million we roughly spent on capital last year. Not only is that amazing for what it brings to our patients, what it brings to our staff, and how it allows us to improve services, but just physically planning and preparing and being able to spend that amount of money in a year is an incredible effort. It takes a huge amount of time and careful planning to make sure we don't disrupt anything for our patients and keep the hospital going while making some of these critical investments. So it's been a great year in that sense. We'll just move to the next slide as we look to the future. It is very challenging in the NHS. We can't hide from that at the moment. I think if you look at the current press headlines, there is pressure everywhere across all organisations. But it's our job to make sure that, in spite of all of that pressure, we do the best thing for our patients, and we continue to drive those efficiencies. I've already said from as Tom was alluding to, with our system partners, because unless we change, unless we really deliver some of those improvements that we're talking about, we won't be able to sustain ourselves. We've done great work getting this far, but to really be sustainable to the future, we've got to really get lean. We've got to use all of our assets as well as we can. And we need to work in that system-focused way, which Tom has obviously spoken so passionately about. I made reference to the plan, the patient quality and productivity plan that's led by my colleague Jim, who's here today. It is a program that cuts across everything in the organisation, and as I say, all of our teams engage every week. They come and represent themselves, look at what they're doing, and try and show how we can improve and make that pound go even further. This year we've got a £26 million target at the trust. That's more than we've ever delivered. But every year we deliver more than we've ever delivered, and we are planning on delivering that this year. And as we heard, we in between all of that capital investment, in between all of the keeping the lights, and we're always investing in the future. And it's really exciting. If anyone's around St Margaret's anytime recently, you will see the Community Diagnostic Centre, just springing up out of a relatively old piece of the estate at the southern end of the St Margaret's Hospital site. And it's brilliant. And you can see this new facility that's coming, and there's even more in the pipeline. And there's always innovations coming. And Dr. Bose is going to share even more exciting news around our Community Diagnostic Centre in her update imminently. So I just wanted to, I need to recommend our annual report and accounts to you. You can see those accounts obviously online. They're very good. So my favourite. I do like a good read of the accounts every year. But I recommend them and I hope you can endorse them. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Janice Bernardo, who is going to talk to us about amazing things we're doing for our school.
Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, so a lot of you I've seen already in the community. So my name is Janice Bernardo. I'm your frailty lead. So a lot of you have worked already in some projects also in the community and in the hospital. And I'm really glad that you are here to witness what we have done so far in the last few years. Okay, so as Tom was saying earlier, the reason why there's urgency to further develop the frailty services is because we've got an aging population. It's not a myth. It's actually there. But also remember that there is an advancement in technology. So we would expect that people will be living longer, which is good in a way, but we also need to expect that there will be more pressure, the things that we are not used to be doing before we will be doing now. And also not just talking about older people, we're also talking about those with long-term condition and those with learning disabilities. I don't want to scare you, but in frailty, we talk about the age of 45 for those people with learning disability or those who were born with Down syndrome. Yeah. So, but as you know, they will be living longer, so that we need to prepare for them. So I'm just sending you a picture of how it would look like in the future, at least in the next 10 years. So yes, we've got business, which is frailty service. So as we said, it's all about integration. It's all about streamline all the services that we have in the system. It's all about system working. And a lot of you have been doing such a great job in terms of raising your hand and said, I have done this service, I've developed this service, how could we align it into the core services, whether it's in the hospital, in the GP surgery, in the hospice, or even the voluntary sectors. So what we have been doing is, yes, there are the 3 shifts that Tom earlier has explained, but also in frailty, we're talking about how do we make it happen. Yeah, because it's not just someone's business about frailty, it's everyone. My biggest worry about the word everyone's business is it becomes no one's business. Because who will be accountable to make sure that we deliver the right care at the right time to our patients closer to home. The home bit is very important. I'm really looking forward to get a new hospital, but I can easily fill hospital with frailty patients, but they will tell me I don't want to be in the hospital. That's all what I hear every single day in the shop floor. So how are we going to do it? We need proactive management. Yeah. So I will tell you earlier what we have done so far, which is how do we involve community and primary care and volunteers in proactive management of frailty patients or other people. When I talk about frailty, I actually don't mean just frailty. I mean about older people. Yeah. We'll also be talking about how do we make sure we have a patient-centered care. And how can we make them proactively manage their own care? It's taking ownership of every single one's healthcare and well-being. Because who else would look after ourselves more than what we can do for us? Yeah. And making sure that the relatives and the family are very much involved in the planning of the care. It's not just one's opinion. It's not just the consultant's opinion or the GP or the matron. It has to be the patient's voice. The family wishes to be there and considered. I'm looking a lot to these hospices because I know they're doing a great job on this one already. Yeah. So with this, we also have in mind tackling health inequalities. And it's not just for Harlow, but it's all for the whole of the West Essex and actually throughout the ICT. We are very fortunate to have a very good I think when I came to the country, it was already there that there's that sense of belongingness between acute and community. So it wasn't hard for me as a physiotherapist to actually integrate with community and build services together. So I want you to imagine how it should look like and how it is feeling like now. Yeah. So if you look at this picture, you've got the adult or you've got a member of the public. So let's say Freddie or even not Freddie, because this is not just a Freddie model, this is also children's model. Yeah, there are different services that we have already identified and working together in terms of integration. When I say integration, it's a real integration. That means there is no wall in between. We train together, like this afternoon, we just finished an integrated training for nurses and AHP spoke acute community. Not just West Essex, we also did Hertfordshire in the group. And you could imagine the richness of the training together and the outcome it would be for our patients. So all of this triangulates with the patient outcomes. So you can see that we've got a lot of different services. These are services that actually raise their hand up and say, we want to work together. We want to minimize the frustration of the patients because they're being passed from one to the other and to the other. And who looks after them at the end? We can't just say that, go back to your GP. You can't, because there's a lot of demand for the GPs. You can't just bring them onto the hospital because the hospital has got limited beds. Yeah, but how do we work together with our tertiary, with our voluntary sectors, and how do we work together with the organized groups in the community? There are different full services in the community that I never knew until 2 weeks ago. So how do we map this? And this is where I really need the help from the local authority, the Harvard, for example. So how do we make sure that we are all aligning these existing, services in the community to make sure we are singing the same song, the same hymn? So how we're doing it at the moment, you've created like a good leadership in the neighborhood teams. Everything is about in the community, in the neighborhood, because that is what is closer to every one of us. You don't need to come to the hospital for a certain services. We need to make sure that they're all built in the local community, accessible for everyone. Of course, for the older population, we need to make sure that they are easily accessible because not everybody can drive. A lot of my patient cohorts are even bedbound. Imagine the hard work it is for them to attend a blood test just to be told, oh, by the way, love, it's going to be tomorrow, not today. It took her 2 hours, 3 hours to dress up. Well, we need to stop that, and we are stopping it. So we're doing something about it. Slide, please. So, if I'm just showing this, so we have been, as I've said, this is all about working together with the public, with voluntary sectors, with community, and the primary care and acute. You could see at the West Essex a decline in the number of urgent and emergency admissions of older people, but it doesn't stop there. It's a long way to go. What we have noticed is, so these are patients with a diagnosis of frailty. So we really need to be proactive and finding where are those patients that haven't even, highlighted in the register. Because we have seen some increase in the number of 65 years old coming to hospital in crisis because they have not yet been diagnosed. So we are very, very careful in terms of finding them, making sure they are aware of the services already that we have built in the community so that we can proactively manage them. I'll give you a good example. So in Harlow, the whole of Harlow, we have a community matron who is doing already a proactive, comprehensive geriatric assessment. So that means before they even reach the crisis, we've already asked them or review their medication. We've already highlighted what are the needs that we needed to address in the community. So it's that proactive approach. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is quite interesting. 2018, 2019, I stand in an AGM where actually I feel like I was a politician when I said, this is what I'm going to do. Because that is when I started building the friendly with the rest of the people at PH and community. And I was very glad to share with you that all of those and even more we have it. Yeah? So in 2018, and I can see some familiar faces that who was there in the event in the tent, 2018, and this is what I said then. We will have a dedicated friend unit, which you will see a picture later on after this slide. But we did not just do a frailty unit. We've actually made it dementia friendly, which I'll show you a picture. And a lot of the pictures of that has been on the slideshow. So our frailty unit now, we call it Older Persons Assessment Liaison. It's now running 7 days a week. Yeah, so it's one of the frailty unit in the east of England who has got the full MGT, multi-professional team. Yeah, the only one that we don't have there is it's not pharmacy, it's a paramedic. We've got 7-day service, pharmacies are there 7 days, so you don't feel anxious to come in the hospital on a Saturday because we know we could get you home the same day, even if it's a weekend. You could try it, even if it is not holiday. Yeah, so you've got social services covering the unit, you've got therapists covering the unit, physio and OT. We even have a dietitian, first in the East of England. Yeah, to have a dietitian dedicated for friends. But we don't stop there. We know that the unit has only got 18 beds. We've got a lot of other people coming in A&E, which is what we needed to divert when we come back to building services, different services in the community. We've already put in interface geriatricians, so that this is a team of advanced clinical nurse practitioners and consultants who will see patients right there in A&E to stop you unnecessarily coming in to be admitted in hospital. No, I have not heard an older person wanting to be in hospital, I can tell you. And then we also have to support the GPs and the matrons and nurses in the community. We have created a link to us, consultants and specialists, which is through the Consultant Connect, for advice and guidance. So that means they know if they decided that the patient is not suitable to come into hospital, we can give them a tap on their shoulder and say, you've got the consultant here on the line, give them a call, and they will call them. And that's a 5 days a week service. We're aiming to increase it to 7 days. And another one that we are very proud of is the phone scar. In the past, when you have fallen, you have to call 999 and to help you get out from the floor. But now, that's why I put the number there. It's a direct line for the public, for the carers, for the family. Call. It is manned by a paramedic and therapist, PT or OT. And they will come and see you at home. The same response on how you get with the paramedics. Obviously, this is not for life-threatening condition. This is for patients in their own home or in the care home who needed to be picked up from the floor with no obvious injuries. They are attached to our ambulance services, so they can do whatever they needed to organize in between. Yeah, they are also connected to the OBAL unit, so instead of you coming to the emergency department, they go straight to the OBAL unit, and we will provide a comprehensive assessment right there within the first 2 hours. Yeah, it looks like I have been giving a lot of what you call it, like promises and things. It's not. It's actually happening. And I think some of you here with relatives that I have seen in the unit. So the big thing for us is the integrated neighborhood team. We can't do it alone. I talked to you about the leadership. We have been going to the MDT meetings with the GPs and your community matrons and pharmacists to make sure that you don't really have to call a geriatrician in the hospital because we could come to you. It's easier for us to come to you than you coming to us. We know that. It's not just about the parking, but it's about getting you prepared for the hospital appointment. And that's why we're going to the community. And we have them. So the bread and butter at the moment is thinking bigger. So we have a lot of cancer diagnosis for older people. We also do know that there are some people who doesn't have the resilience to carry on with the treatment and they just wanted to be left alone. We won a national award for a cancer-friendly pathway. So in terms of making sure that we have an honest conversation, giving you time to talk about what you want for your own health, listening to your wishes with the geriatrician and doing a comprehensive assessment in a one-stop shop. Yeah? We are going towards doing the same approach for those who've been diagnosed but needed treatment, so we can make sure that we can optimize with older people before they even go for surgery. And last, but not the least, none of this could happen easily without education. So we're very good, as I've said, we just had an education program this afternoon for the community and acute, but also we do a lot of public engagement and education. Who's from Rainbow Services? There you go there. So we tied up with Rainbow Services and other voluntary sectors because they are running already different groups in the community. The same as the Fun Fitness and Friends, dementia dementia group, but we are injecting frailty conversations in there in terms of proactive managing your care and proactive managing your well-being. So these are the things that we owe it to you, because if we don't want you to be coming to hospital unnecessarily, we need to make sure that you're equipped to look after your own self. This is like you taking ownership of your well-being. I think that's me. Yeah, so this is a picture of our team. On the top is the whole of the West Essex frailty team. But at the bottom is the frailty unit in the hospital. So more than happy for you to come and visit, not as a patient, but as a visitor to help us improve further the pathway that we provide. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It really is a genuine privilege to be able to speak to you this evening about a wonderful opportunity for all of us in our community diagnostic centre. Tom and colleagues have shared something about it. The reason that I'm standing up here speaking around this, I've got my colleagues in the room, Sally, Sean, many other colleagues who've been working with us on this, is that this community diagnostic centre is inspirational for me. It gives us the opportunity to connect with our partners in the community, our GPs and all of our colleagues, as well as patients, in designing some really innovative offers that start with diagnostic capability, which I'll touch on, but also real enhancement in how we deliver some of our clinical pathways for our patients. So the Community Diagnostic Centre programme is part of the national programme, and you can see on the slide there, it's really about getting more diagnostics close to the patient on the national programme. And we've now got nationally 165 CDC sites in England, all of different maturity. So our centre is due to open in January 2026. So only a few months now. Really excited about that. Next slide, please. So this schematic is essentially describing the phasing of our programme. So this is really a clinical programme developed by colleagues clinically, operationally, but with our wonderful estates and strategy colleagues who are building the building for us at the moment. And if you go across to St Margaret's, any of you who are familiar with the site, and some of you who visited on our walk-arounds can see literally the building going up in front of us, new elements of it, and repurposing of some of the old sites. So it's very exciting to see. And you can see on the phasing there, it's just explaining about the various elements of the build planning and then the training, and our ambition to have our first patient in the CDC on our breathlessness pathway, which is a really radical, unique approach to patient care. Because rather than going to cardiology or respiratory, you're being cared for around your symptom, your breathlessness, and those services coming around to deal with you in the CDC in terms of your diagnostics and your care pathway. So it's going to be really radical. We've already had a few patients on our pilot go through that pathway. We've had really positive feedback, both from patients and from GP colleagues. So our CDC will be located at St Margaret's Hospital in Epping, and as we said, springtime will be inviting our first patients through the door. Next slide, please. And the programme has been a real opportunity to put our values and creative collaboration into practice. So we have a really wide range of stakeholders building the pathways with us, including health and social care partners. We've got our GP partners, colleagues from our community teams, etc., all involved in planning the pathways. And certainly the most mature pathway, which is around breathlessness, has been planned and being built in for a year. We've started the delivery already in anticipation of the CDC opening, and that's been a real team effort working with colleagues all across West Essex, and really excited to be involved in that work. So our Community Diagnostics Centre, what services will be provided? Well, I have the privilege of letting you know that although my slide says 6 CDC pathways, we've had confirmation of an additional 3 pathways. This is tremendous work because it offers ability for us to do our breathlessness, enhanced pathways with sleep studies, additional work as well. Some of our patients that currently go to foster care will be able to have their care locally. Some of our patients on the new transnatal endoscopy pathway that's been added in with new equipment will allow us to be able to see somebody in CDC who's got a possible diagnosis of esophageal cancer, give them a CT test and an endoscopy all on the same day. And then we will be able to tell them whether or not they have that diagnosis. That's so much of an improvement in pathway, which historically has been very fragmented. So again, I can't tell you how privileged it is for us as clinical colleagues to be able to work together on delivering these pathways for our patients. Next slide, please. So there's some pictures. Some colleagues might see themselves on there if they look closely. So what we want to be doing in our CDC is to advance our diagnostic excellence, delivering that seamless, compassionate and timely care for patients. One of the really great innovations is that we'll be doing some real-time CT scan reporting. So colleagues have been employed to actually not only be on site, but to be able to report the results of the CT scan the same day it's taken, and we will be able to give that clinical feedback to patients on some of our pathways. The key here, we've talked about healthcare inequalities. We're an Anglican institution here at BAH and with our wider system. We've got opportunities through the CDC to employ new colleagues onto apprenticeship pathways. That's a really exciting piece for us, and we're exploring that. To make sure that we are delivering care, but with local colleagues and really bringing people through from school sort of right the way through with a vision for how they may work within healthcare in the future within our patch. We want to accelerate pathways. We want to drive obviously better health outcomes for our patients. And all of this is really through pathways that are developed collaboratively with GP and community colleagues. So we're no longer, the ambition is no longer navigating silos as patients, but actually all of our services and system wrapping around the patient's pathway. So that's the opportunity we have here to model within the CDC. Next slide, please. Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for listening.
Well, thank you to everybody that's presented this evening. I think it's been great actually hearing about how much progress we've made in terms of the services for our patients and communities. So now it's time for you all to ask some questions. So I'm hoping people have got plenty to ask. And so we've got somebody with a mic that can, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, just check you can hear me, yeah?
Yes.
So I support people that are blind, deaf, non-verbal, housebound, and are wheelchair users. The real challenging people to move. We've accessed some of these services already, we know where this is going. But the simple fact that when somebody cannot use a phone, and something is only phone, why is there no email or text facility or any other communication system? We might be in a minority. Well, it's preventable barriers when it comes to accessibility, and sometimes accessing NHS transport, none of us qualify. So it's expensive because we have to get a taxi because public transport just doesn't work for us. So all of those are quite preventable. I see where this is going, but if services could come to the patient home, for example, if you just need a blood test, if you do need hospital equipment, that's necessary. But some of this could come a lot closer in the GP surgery, or say a community nurse or paramedic or somebody coming out to the patient's home. If somebody has fallen, the 2-hour window while they're laying on the floor could make a life-changing difference.
Thank you so much. I agree with everything you've just said. So firstly, I'm going to stand up actually, what's this? Firstly, with regard to accessibility of being able to contact us, absolutely there should be alternative means of communication rather than just a phone number. That can be email, that can be text, but actually one of the things that's at the back here also is our patient portal, which is another way we're encouraging patients to get in touch with our services without the need to phone the phone number and get a really frustrating voicemail and all that we hear through the complaints we currently receive. So we are right now revolutionising, I think, the way that patients can contact the hospital, when the patient portal is at the front of that. Some more information at the back. But the overriding point that you make is absolutely what acute to community is all meant to be, what it's meant to be about. Why are we inconveniencing patients? Why are we forcing patients to go from pillar to post to access different services in a system that, to be frank, is quite confusing? It's made even worse if a patient has mobility issues or some degree of disability. We completely accept that. So there's another reason why, unless something absolutely needs to be provided in an acute environment, everything else needs to be more accessible and more community-based. We've started on that journey. We've got a long, long way to go working with system partners. Thanks for your question.
Hello everyone, I'm Kelly Harmon from Harley Council, leading on public health. So Janice, I'd love to connect with you about the forensic work. But my question is, we're on the brink of autumn winter, and I'd just like to understand what measures are being put in place to put winter pressures among staff, but also the patients that might be coming into the hospital.
I struggled to hear the end of that because it was a bit distorted. So we're coming into winter. What steps are being put in place to what was the last bit, sorry?
Pressures for staff, but also for patients that come into hospital.
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely. And if you were to come to the hospital this week, which maybe some of you have done, you'd have seen that we're busy already, like super busy already, and it's September. So what's one thing we do as health and care partners, we run these things called multi-agency discharge events. They're called MAID events. And what it requires is for a short period of time, mental health, community services, primary care services, acute services get together, and we put in additional resources. We do things that we don't ordinarily do. We change the way that we use community beds. We have primary care reaching into our hospitals. We get more of our clinicians coming to the front door to stream away patients that don't actually require acute care. We have more clinical walkarounds to improve the level of discharge from the hospital so the patients aren't necessarily stuck in our inpatient beds. Whenever we do one of those events, it's always tremendously successful. Our performance improves, number of discharges massively improves, and actually patient satisfaction during those periods also improves. So the question that we've asked ourselves internally this week is, why does it take a special event to do the right thing for patients? So as you would expect, we have a winter plan. The Health and Care Partnership has a winter plan. What we're doing as part of that winter plan is learning from some of those MAID events that we've put on, trying to move away from them being one-off events, but actually being just part of how we do it. And money can't be an object when it comes to doing that. But again, it's also not something we can do on our own. We need the consistent engagement from local authorities, from community partners, and from primary care as well. So there's quite a few changes underway for this forthcoming winter.
Hi there, my name's John Whitehouse from Epping Hospital Council there with Margaret, my ward. I'm just particularly interested to hear about what's happening inside the building that's actually rising from the ground there. But I also asked a wider question about the population growth that was mentioned at the beginning of the session, and with that, particularly with the planning agreements and so forth, generally there are discussions around contributions towards health expenditure and so forth, which I understand is fully led by the ICB. But I wondered how involved Hospital Trust was with that. Will that change if the ICB is taking a more strategic role? And is there a clear idea of how much that will generate for capital expenditure for the Trust over the next few years?
Thank you, really good questions. So we are really closely involved with local authorities, particularly around planning, as you can imagine. We're involved for a number of reasons. First of all, we need to know how many houses are coming online and when, what that does to our population by how much, and particularly what proportions of the population will change over that period of time. As you heard from Janice, I think it's something like 80% of the NHS spend is spent on people over the age of 65. So if you have a disproportionate number of those people coming in, you have additional pressure. However, also young families, you can imagine that puts pressure on our maternity services. So you have to understand how those will change over time. Your specific question around planning and funding for forest planning, we work really closely with the ICB on that, the University Care Board on that, and we get what's called Section 106 contributions. And those Section 106 contributions are negotiated by the ICB on our behalf, but we have a big input into that. However, the vast majority of those contributions tend to go towards primary community care services rather than acute services. And acute services, it's quite complex how it works, but if you are being funded separately for your service, you can't apply for this 106 funding. So it is quite a complex formula that we work through. But just to reassure you, we will be continuing to work with all of the commissioners on contributions to services. And then that doesn't matter if those services are being delivered across board either. They'll negotiate on behalf of the NHS, not just the patients that they serve. So just to reassure you that we do continue to have those conversations and those negotiations with both developers in order to make sure we get the right contribution. What we have here is
Thank you. A few questions for you, if I may. First of all, you were saying you're going to carry out more activities within the surgeries to help the art diversity to the community. Our local surgery at the moment is suffering from the fact they're doing several items that they're not being compensated for. Do you intend to financially reward them for doing the services that you used to do in the hospital? My second question is, you spoke about Bishop Stortford. You haven't spoken about the hospital at Saffron. I'm from the north of Huddersfield. Everything seems to be donating around the south of the area. I'm not denying Epping has got these facilities, but so do we. Our part of Huddersfield, the population is growing exponentially. It's really rocketing new developments. Are you taking that into account when you're doing your planning for the future? And you said about Bishop Stortford Hospital, what are you actually planning to do there? Because for us, get from, say, Newport or Saffron to Epping would take us probably 4 or 5 hours in public transport. We need more services in the north of Essex, so please don't ignore us.
Yeah, brilliant questions. So first of all, the question about GPs not being compensated for work that they do in their surgeries, there's a bit on that which at the minute is outside of our control. There's a bit that's inside our control. So the bit that explaining the current situation will be commissioning decisions of the Integrated Care Board, which will be historic, which is not something that's been in our control. However, I go back to what I said as part of my presentation. The way the services are being commissioned is changing. And actually, year-to-year commissioning over the next few months will start to fall, or over the next few years, I should say, will start to fall more on us. And we're having conversations with primary care now about what that looks like relative to the services that they're currently providing. Also on that point, if we're serious about improving primary care services so that the patients have greater access to primary care, so that primary care does get properly compensated, so that primary care can take a greater range of services for local people, then we have to play our part in that. If you think about the West Essex Health and Care system, whilst we haven't got buckets of cash to spend, as Tom will rightly tell us, we have the deepest pockets in the system. We're the biggest healthcare organisation in our local system. So if we're not going to bridge the gap with regard to primary care, who is? And we're already having conversations, for example, about how we can potentially even employ local GPs, recognising that GP underemployment locally is a real issue for us. We have trained GPs that are going underemployed. I certainly think that we've got a role to play there with regard to funding those posts, not only actually to work in primary care, but also to work at PAH's front door, helping us to treat patients who don't require acute care. So for historic reasons, That does sit with the Integrated Care Board. In future, it will sit more with us. In the meantime, we're looking to use our resources to support primary care development in any event. So that's the first thing. The second thing with regard to Saffron Walden, yeah, we haven't forgotten about it. So in my mind, when I think about neighbourhood health hubs, I think about north, south, west and east, and centre actually. So we just can't rely upon PAH, acute environment for Harlow. Like I said earlier on, I think we need to jump on the bandwagon of Harlow's regeneration, put health facilities in the town centre, just down the road there. Epping needs a solution. The obvious asset there is St Margaret. You've heard about that today. I think we need to cater for our Hertfordshire-based patients. Hearts and Essex Hospital and Bishop Stortford is the obvious solution there. To the east of us, we often don't talk about that, but Ongar Memorial Hospital is a fantastic facility that's hugely underutilised, like so many of our community assets. Why aren't we doing more, working with Brimfield Hospital in partnership perhaps, to put more local services there? And of course, the same is true to the north of us, in Saffron Walden up in North Uttlesford, where we absolutely have an ambition to work with Cambridge University Hospitals to provide some services there, but also EPIT to provide community services there. So that too can be developed into becoming a neighbourhood health hub, avoiding the need for people from Saffron Walden and North Uttlesford need to come all the way down to Harlow, or indeed all the way up to Cambridge to access the majority of their care. So it's not forgotten about, sir. I promise you. Yes, we're good at the walk.
I'm sorry I missed the start of it, but I will try and catch up on the outstanding presentation. I'm thinking there's a lot of ideas that can be shared across different services. It's not just an East of England problem, it's not just a Wales problem. There's a huge opportunity here to use virtual hospital or lots of other settings that are not necessarily needed at an acute hospital to relieve the A&E pressures, the inpatient pressures, and with respect, a rather long queue in outpatients. So in different parts of the country, it's a little bit more developed. So even in a sort of zero budget scenario, thinking internationally and sharing ideas, the communication between primary, secondary, tertiary care, whether it's NHS, private, or who actually provides that service, because I'm having a bit of a battle with HCRG not really functioning. Likewise, the council's not really functioning. So as a family, we've done a lot of stuff unpaid, and we shouldn't have needed to do that. We ended up calling 999, going to A&E, and doing lots of stuff that was entirely preventable. So we've been on a very long learning curve. I'm a retired pharmacist, I'm an unpaid carer, I'm a parent. Some services work absolutely amazing. Others, it's a bit of a work in progress. But the government needs to fund services properly, and it should be the cost to the patient or the carer. Thank you.
Thank you. It's quite well what you just said there. I'll talk about two aspects in particular. I'll look to my colleagues for anything else that they wanted to add to it. First of all, do we need to be learning from what happens elsewhere? Absolutely, we do. And actually, one thing that Michael here is trying to lead for us is looking at which international partnerships we can form so that it works around the world, because we won't have all the knowledge locally, probably don't have all the knowledge nationally, and actually there's other systems around the world that have really got neighbourhood health, for example, really well wired into what they do as part of their bread and butter. So we need to learn from them. I also think that wouldn't be such a coup for PAH, a coup for Harlow, for us to be twinned with a major player in Australia or USA. There's a bit of excitement for our clinicians in that, so that's a secondary benefit. The other thing to say about moving away from acute care and about the budgets is that acute care is the most expensive type of care to provide, right? So if we're seeing patients in an acute environment who don't require acute care because there's a suitable alternative like remote outpatients or outpatients in the community or virtual hospital is the other example you cited, but not only is it inconvenient for patients, it also costs more and is therefore less value for money for the taxpayer. So as I said in my presentation, which you may have missed, we've started our journey with regards to local integration from the shift to acute community. but we could do so much more, and we'll be learning from the very best as we develop our plans.
No, that's a really great question. And the point about, I think, which was saying about how do we just share some of those ideas, as Tom was alluding to, I have the pleasure of representing the finance community in the East of England. And I was at an event recently where I was hearing from some of our younger trainees, the people who are going through their finance training. And one, I was amazed just how everyone I speak to, whether they've worked in the NHS for most of their careers or right at the start of their careers, have got great ideas, and we need to listen to some of those. So, you know, the innovation sits within. I did a bit about my career story, and probably the best bit of advice I was ever given in the NHS was to steal the good ideas with pride, you know, in that sense. Don't be proud. There are great ideas out there, and we will build on some of those. So I think there's absolutely something about listening to our community and making sure we echo some of those things, and at the same time looking within to try and solve some of the problems we face. So absolutely borrow that sentiment, and it absolutely goes through a lot of what we do.
A couple of points. Nothing about St Albans in your presentations. It'd be good to hear what progress there is. And with the changes in ICS and ICB, will that still be available to the Harlow and the Harlow and surrounding villages community? And then, secondly, the community was very disappointed when Harlow Hospital came out in the lower quartile of the NHS scorecard recently published, and maybe you could give some explanation for why that happened and how we can expect that to improve and by how much. Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. And I'll answer the first part of my question, and I'll hand over to Tom for the second part. So you're talking about the electric park down in St Albans. So that's an investment to be made, £25 million to be made to build an electric park down in St Albans. It's being run across the whole of our ICB, that's the whole of our region, and all three huge organisations being involved in that. And I was a senior reporting officer for that, so I was responsible for putting that programme together on behalf of the whole region. It's building two brand new theatres, which are going to be commissioned in the next couple of months, in the next few months, and it has faced a number of challenges along the way. The expectation is that Princess Alexandra will be delivering services in that hub, so we will be continuing to deliver services in that hub. Has changed a bit. The exact services we're going to deliver, and they're being finalised at the moment. But it's ENT services, I think, we're delivering through the hub. We're really proud of that. We do think it's a great opportunity. Irrespective of the boundary changes, we do expect we'll still be delivering services in that hub. However, we are looking at what other potential surgical hubs we could develop, and we're looking at that right across the patch, and we're also talking about that with our new commissioners as well, and we're trying to identify opportunities to meet the needs of our patients, because we do recognise it's a long way to go down to full local services. They will be world-class, really high quality services, but they are a long way to go. But I hope that answers that part of your question. Tom, do you want to pick up on
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So the league tables, government league tables, not universally popular in the NHS world. It's quite a blunt tool in terms of assessing trusts, including acute trusts like ours. So the new oversight framework came in only a few months ago. And the fact remains that if that framework had been applied to PAH last year or the year before that, in fact, any time since COVID, we would be at the same level, if not lower down, because things have slightly got better against the metrics, but the framework is new. Is that an excuse? No, it's not. And I'm really concerned about how low down we are in the league table. There are various factors for it. So the sort of thing the league table considers are the patient survey, what patients tell us, the staff survey. We consider the financial performance and whether we receive deficit funding, which Tom covered earlier on. It covers whether we're hitting our operational standards and the quality metrics too. And I think we should strive to do far, far more. And in fact, if I'm being really self-critical, I think that when I first came to the organisation, there was a sense of, well, this is just how things are around here. This isn't how things need to be around here. We could be so much better for our patients. Let me tell you about some of the changes that we're making. So first of all, we've already made and are making further significant senior management and leadership changes to get a fresh approach to some of the way that we tackle the patient care that we need to deliver. Secondly, we've just had a massive restructuring exercise of our divisions. We've completely changed the way that we are operating internally. Two reasons for that. One, to ensure a greater degree of clinical leadership as opposed to managerial leadership. Two, to remove some of the tiers of bureaucracy that we have in the organisation. Three, to ensure that our new operating model also factors in neighbourhood health and community care, as I was talking about earlier on as well. And actually to have fewer divisions overall so that our staff are more bound together. We've got too many silos already in our organisation. That doesn't lead to positive care or experiences for our staff. We're investing hugely post-consultation with regard to organisational development support for staff. We want to develop a sense of belonging for our members of staff. You know, it's not right for me that people, you know, just happen to work at PAH and I work at PAH. But it needs to be to work for PAH. There should be an emotional connection there to make sure that you care. And so we need to change some of our working culture around that. And there's a big cultural development program to try and support that. In particular areas where we're struggling, so for example, cancer care, we've had external reviews, so 2 external reviews, one from NHS England, our regulator, one from a neighbouring trust who are excelling in cancer care. It was clear from the outcomes of both of those reviews that we need to completely change the way that cancer care is structured in the hospital, change the referrals we make to what we call tertiary or specialist partners, and also change some of our individual cancer pathways. Of course, some of the pressures that we experience when it comes to the operational targets are caused by the fact that there is a lack of community infrastructure, a lack of integration, and a lack of engagement with primary care, mental health services, community services. That is part of the reason why I spent so much in this AGM talking about some of the changes that we're looking to make in that space. Again, we're at the beginning of that journey, but I assure you that absolutely started it. And any member of the staff of the organisation now, I think, will be able to articulate how things have shifted over the last few months. So it isn't good. We are where we are in the league table. That would have been the case had the new framework been applied over the last few years. And I'm really clear and confident that we need to make some radical changes to shift our fortune. But you know, I was appointed to a big change agenda, and that's what I'm going to deliver. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, the last time has been really interesting, but incredibly complicated and difficult to follow, even for someone like myself as a very interested patient. So my message really is, how am I going to communicate this to the general public? Because there's a ton of work to be done on that score as far as I'm concerned. I'll just give you one example. I think the hospital trust did itself no favours at all in the last couple of years with the stop-start, with the question marks about the new hospital and all the delays and obfuscation that went on. And I could tell you and it's something that went down very badly with the general public. So I think you've got quite a PR job to do to re-engage our community in that regard. And my final point is particularly about the disadvantaged groups in our community, who in many ways are the people who most need the new services that you are talking about, but they of course are the most difficult to reach. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the strategy that you've got to reach those groups, not just in an aspirational way, but in a very planned, disciplined way, because up to now it seems that we're not reaching in the way that we should. Thanks.
So first of all, I'm sorry if some of the content of the AGM has been a bit technical or a bit confusing. But we're dealing with a huge agenda here, and change agenda. Some of it is technical, some of it is highly complex, but we've tried to make the material so that everybody can understand it. If there's any aspect of that which has been confusing, I'm sorry about that. And we'll think about how we can communicate it more clearly and more straightforwardly. Overall, we know that we need to get our communications right. In fact, the first director appointment that I made on coming into post was a new director of communications, because I recognised that historically the communication to the public hasn't been good, hadn't been positive, and we needed a refresh with regard to our whole approach to communicating with the public, communicating with the media, communicating with our stakeholders. The new hospital programme, the start, yeah, I agree. I mean, without wanting to pass the buck too much, there's a degree to which that's outside of our control. That this is a government scheme, it's a national scheme. It isn't, we don't have the capital to be able to start building a new hospital today, and that's been the case over several years. What I would say is that we recognise the frustration members of the public and staff are faced with regards to that. And I couldn't be doing any more political lobbying to try and get our scheme over the line. But it doesn't exist within our control. That is the fact of the situation. But I nevertheless understand the frustration. There was a third point that I wrote down. I can't reach groups yet. Yeah, completely. So I briefly mentioned it in the presentation, but just to reiterate it here in perhaps a bit more depth. For me, an AGM should not be the totality of how we get out there and engage members of the public. So one thing that we're working with a patient panel on, and also our patient experience team, is going out there and engaging with pre-existing groups, particularly in some of those harder to reach groups that you talk about, to join those sessions and tell people both what we're doing about the hospital, but also be prepared to listen as to what people's experiences of the hospital are. So one example, a couple of weeks ago, Giovanni here and I, Chief People Officer Gio, went to one of our dementia carers groups that was being put on during the daytime in Arlo. Patients with dementia often struggle from less than ideal experiences if there's a lack of understanding in their acute hospital environment as to how best to cater for these dementia patients. So we went out to that community event specifically to hear about those experiences, and we heard stuff that we would never have heard had we just sat back in the hospital and assumed everything was okay. So every single month, for the next few months, Shahid at the back here, wearing a very bright yellow t-shirt, is organising us, executive members of staff, to get out there, pre-existing community groups, particularly those that are likely to suffer from health inequalities because of what they're dealing with, to ensure that we can better understand our population. It's only if we do that do we have any chance of providing better care for all. Thank you.
I really like the mantra of help us to help you. There's some potentials here for communication in waiting rooms or on letters or on the hospital website. I struggle to use Amex Health. I've tried, but I can't actually get into any meetings or understand how to use it. For me, the phone is the absolute last resort, but for people that are digital, there's a huge opportunity there. There's lots of things on your website where we could really enhance the information. So involving the voluntary services, the charities, the flow of staff. I'm trying to join the patient panel. I've just finished a chaplaincy volunteering course. I'm really interested in the NHS, but I'm thinking globally. I'm studying medicine. And I'm really enjoying meeting with people, linking with industry, looking at funding, looking how different services work. And I'm unemployed. Thank you. I think we can use mobile units a little bit better. The little surgery units, the mammogram going out into the centres. So I'm a real advocate for please use the NHS responsibly because they're lifesavers. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, quite a lot of what you've said there. So a few reflections from me. First of all, any suggestions about how we can improve our website to make it more user-friendly and accessible? We have Yolanda Walker there in the crowd, who's responsible for a fantastic new website. So if there are any tips and suggestions, Yolanda is no doubt on hand to hear how we can improve it further. In terms of joining a patient panel, again, Nat is in the third row here, so I'm sure Alan would love to have a conversation with you about how you can become more involved. And the other bit, which is help us to help you, and we haven't mentioned it actually, particularly in this AGM, are the fantastic volunteering services that we have at the hospital. As led by Philippa, who's at the back there in the third row from the back. Again, another set of award-winning services. And I'm going to give you two experiences of my experience of working with the volunteers. So 2 weeks ago now, I spent a day on the front desk of Princess Alexandra Hospital. As you come in, most of the time, apart from out of hours, the front desk is manned by volunteers. They deal with such an array of patient and public, and sometimes actually staff queries about where things are, how you pay for parking, how to interpret a particular letter. And the amount I learned just from that half day spending with the volunteers, I got a whole new level of, just a huge respect for the people that do this in their own time as volunteers. Another example, I spent a day shadowing our butterfly team in the hospital. And the butterfly team going around and speak to patients and also the families of patients that often are at the end of their life. So quite a hard job to do as a volunteer. But the additional care, the support, the compassion that they're able to provide, it has such an immeasurable impact on the overall care that we as a hospital can provide. Thinking of things that our perhaps hospital doctors or hospital nurses wouldn't necessarily think of during that time. And it does really sort of bridge any gap that we leave behind with regards to genuinely providing holistic care for our patients. Again, it was all inspiring. So what I'd say is there are multiple ways to get involved with our hospital. One of them is coming to community events like this. There's some other events that I've talked about that we're planning, but equally there's the patient panel, there's volunteering, and other avenues too. We want to be better connected to the communities that we serve.
Good evening, I'm Ganesh, one of the consumer physician in mental care. So Michael has addressed Thomas and Oxford, but I disagree with that. I would say it's Dr. Lafferty. I will tell you why. I worked in NHS for the last 20 years as a clinician. The closest in some of the hospitals I worked as a clinician was I've seen the closest I've seen a chief executive is in a hospital magazine. So here you have a CEO who walks into the ward. And I lost count of the number of times he's been in my ward. And sometimes you wonder whether Tom has anything else to do than being in the wards. And sometimes you feel like you are fighting with him to see patients. And I've seen Tom walking into my ward as a volunteer. The only costume I haven't seen him is walking with the stethoscope around his neck. So, I should admit that we are extremely fortunate to have Tom as our chief executive. And I don't know if Lance is hearing it, but he should be rest assured that his legacy is safe. So coming back to what I wanted to say now, is, the three pillars which the government has forward, really the analog to digital, the sickness to prevention, and the acute to community. So what we should be focusing on is the digital data we have. We have a fantastic Alexa, the patient record, which I've been involved during the early stages, and I'm extremely proud to be working in Process Alexandra with the fantastic digital network we have. So what we should be doing is doubling up on the data which it's being created and looking at what drives the patients into the hospital, and rather than looking at data, number of patients, percentage of the patients from each areas in the heart coming into a hospital. So why are these patients coming into the hospital from the data and digital footprints they leave? So what we could do from the digital footprints to see what can be done to follow the digital footprints for those patients and convert sickness into prevention. What could be done for those patients to provide the services which they are seeking in an acute care in the community? So we are working on a panel, and part of the panel is looking at redeveloping the stroke services in PhD. And when I asked about the data, how many patients have been through PH in the last year with stroke, the amount of information it was generating is mind-boggling. I mean, it's a fantastic source of information. I think what we should do is double up on getting the best data analysts to augment the team, which we have in the trust, and follow the data to see what we can do to provide better services to our community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ganesh. And your comments at first were just too kind and rather embarrassing, but thank you. Digital footprints, I'm going to pass to Jim McLeish. Jim is our Chief Transformation Officer. He's in the crowd, you're not expecting this. He's also responsible for our digital services. Digital footprints, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Ganesh. And Ganesh has been one of the key clinicians leading digital transformation across the trust. I'm very grateful to have him. We have a significant ambition across our organisation, not only to provide the best in breed digital platform, but to get our patients and the users of our service involved in building that as we move forward. We've also got big plans for our patient portal, which you've heard about this evening, and we've got Shahid in the back who's been also leading that programme. We work with our patients and the users of our services. And of course, the government in the NHS 10-year plan has set a clear ambition for the digital footprint that makes access to our services easier for the people that use it, the relatives that need to access it, and more importantly, at the same time, for the staff that have to work across the healthcare footprint. So we want to look at how we can do that across our integrated neighbourhood teams and across the providers that work in our patch, with the aim of having that information shareable. One key benefit for our patients is not having to tell somebody 4 or 5 times the same piece of information that they've told the GP, or they've told the community nurse, or told the specialist practitioner. So we have plans in place over the next 5 years to achieve that. And if I can ask everybody in the room, the one thing you could help us with the digital footprint is sign up for the NHS app. The NHS app is going to be the NHS's way of communicating with everybody that uses services across the whole of the NHS. And we're building our footprint to link directly into that, so we have one seamless way of passing information across the healthcare providers, whether they're in the community or whether they're in the hospital setting. So if you leave with one message, sign up for the NHS app, encourage your relatives to do the same, and sign up to a digital platform across the hospital, which is our patient portal.
So I think we're a bit over time, but look, thank you so much for your engagement today. We hope the presentations that we had earlier on are of interest, or reflect upon the gentleman's comments about how we can make it slightly more straightforward in future. Nevertheless, I hope you found the clinical presentations in particular compelling and exciting. We're certainly really excited about it. And I'm so pleased that we decided to do this, in the middle of Harlow, out of the working hours, face to face, rather than trying to do it through Microsoft Teams. It feels better engagement, it feels more real. So thank you so much for giving up your evening to come and hear from what we have to say. Thank you for your questions, for all of us on the executive panel thinking here. And certainly after this, perhaps we'll provide a few more details from our communications department, how you can get in touch with us after this event closes here tonight. But for now, I'll hand you back to our chair, Mr. Usher.
Yeah, so just to close off, just to say thank you to everybody for attending this evening, and I hope you found it interesting. And I think it's been excellent just having the opportunity to hear about all the progress that's being made and the initiatives currently underway. And communication is absolutely a personal point, and we've got to find ways of communicating what we're doing in a way that people can relate to, so it becomes meaningful to them. I think that's all for now. I think everybody's probably ready to go home. So thank you very much, and have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.